All right, we're here in lesson number 7, and we're going to deal with strings and how to parse strings, such as getting substrings or specific spots, splitting strings, putting strings together, etc. Now, what I want you to do is create a new Windows Forms application. And again, as I progress through the training, I'm going to do less and less of the repetitive tasks. And I'm going to ask you to basically set these things up yourself. So here I've got basically one button. And over here at the lower right in the properties, you can see that I call this button underscore do stuff. I have a text box, which is text underscore inputs for the name. And then I have a label here called label underscore results. And I changed the text property here to be results. And that's where we'll display any kind of information that we parse together after we press the do stuff button. So go ahead and pause the video. Go ahead and create a new application and set your app up with the UI to match exactly what I've shown here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to double click on the do stuff button, and that will create an event handler here or a block of code that will execute when the button is pressed. Now we're going to start out by declaring a string variable. So we enter in the data type first, and then we do a spacebar, and we'll just say my string as an example. And then we're going to say equals, and then I'm going to put two quotes here, or an empty quotes, and I'll put a semicolon at the end. So again, remember in C# that we have our data type, we have the variable name, then we have this equal sign, and then everything to the right of the equal sign is basically the value that this variable name is being set to. And then we have a semicolon at the end of each one of our C# statements. Now, watch this. I'm going to do string, and we'll say add string equals now. And then I'll put a semicolon, and we'll say string results equals my string plus add string. And basically what this is doing is it's taking these two separate string values and it's adding them together. Now, whenever you have an empty quotes like this or an empty string, another way to write this is basically string.empty. I usually don't do that. I almost always put like basically an empty quotes like this if I'm just doing a blank string or setting it to basically empty. But if let's say that we want right now, what this is going to do is it's going to string these two variables together. So my right and now, so my string plus add string variable is going to create a new string as a result called right now. So let's actually set the label for the results. So label underscore results dot text is equal to the results string. Okay, and so we'll debug and press play here. So when I press do stuff, it says right now, and notice that there's no spacebar in there. Okay, well let's take this another level. Let's go ahead and do another plus sign. So we're going to add two plus signs in there, and we're going to string three different strings together. So we can actually enter in an actual string value. So we can just do a space bar. We can put a dash in here. And so this is really neat where you can concatenate basically, a fixed string that you type here or string variables. So my string plus the spacebar dash and then add string is going to go together. So let's go ahead and run this. And we'll say do stuff, and it says write dash now. All right, another way we can do this is there is actually, we'll say results equals string dot format. So this is a function or a method here that we can do where we actually string things together. And the way that this works is you can actually come in and you can put in like a variable sort of definition inside of here. So basically we'll do that. We'll put the dash, and then we'll do the 1, and then we can do comma, and you'll see here that the IntelliSense is telling you that it's expecting you to pass some arguments in here. So this is the source string format, and then there's this comma where we can put in, for instance, my string variable, and then we can put in the add string variable, and we can continue on to pass arguments there. Now when we do this, this is really going to give us the same thing. So I'm going to comment out this code, and I'm just going to go ahead and press play. Oh, looks like we've got a problem because I didn't declare this variable here since I commented out the previous code. So we'll go ahead and run this. And it gives us exactly the same thing. Now, performance-wise, This is a little bit better from what I've always understood on the compiler. If you're doing lots of string operations, this is a little bit easier rather than actually concatenating a bunch of strings together like this. But these are two different ways that you can do it. What's the value in doing it this way versus another way? The way that I first showed with the plus plus. This is just a little bit cleaner if you have really complex strings or things that you're doing, where you can just kind of put these variable names or basically placeholders in there. So 0 means the first argument, 1 means the second argument, and then putting these curly brackets basically are just sort of a formatting for this. And then everything else I can just type in anything that I want, and then those variable names are going to fit in the 0 and the 1. So watch this. We'll press play, do stuff, write apples dash now. Okay, so let's show you a few other different types of methods that you can do to change and manipulate strings. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out, and I'll declare a new string variable here, and I'll call it profile size. And I'm going to set that equal to a string of W24 by 55. And remember, anytime you define a string value, it's got to be inside of quotes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get the first 3 characters here in this profile string. So I'm going to get the W24, and then I'm going to not care about the rest. So how do I do that? I'm just going to say string nominal depth equals profile size, and then there's a dot. And if you see all of these basically methods here, and methods in Visual Studio, anytime you see these like purple boxes, basically you'll see that this is a method here that I'm working with. And so there's a substring method that we're specifically looking for, or function. And so you can see in the IntelliSense that it actually shows you the format of what you need to do and what you're inputting and what it actually does. So I'm going to say substring here, and I'm going to do open parentheses, and it'll automatically put the closing one in there. And it basically says, well, where's the start index in the string that you want to read? Well, I want to start at position 0. So position 0 in programming is basically the first character. So whether it's the first item in a list or a collection, or the first character in a string, the smallest index or the first item index is always 0. So I want to start at 0, which is right in front of the W. So this is the 0 position. The right in front of the 2 would be the 1 position, then 2, then 3, etc. So if I look at this, if I want to start reading from the 0 position, then I want to read over 1, 2, 3 characters. I'm actually going to put 0, and then there's comma, and then you can tell it the length of characters in that string that you want to read. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a 0, 3 here, then semicolon. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and change this results here to output the nominal depth. All right, so let's go ahead and press play. And then we'll say do stuff. And we'll see here that in the label, it says W24. So this is how you can kind of get a substring of something specific that you're looking for. Now, let's try something else. Let's actually say that we want to get to the 55, but we don't know exactly where the X is in the character. Like, so let's say that this was 234, and we didn't know that where the position of this X was. So what I'm going to do is, instead of the nominal depth, I'm just going to double, / here, so that way we can comment that line out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an int value now, and I'm going to say location, or index actually, to term this better, the index of basically the X value. Okay, and then when I say equals, what I can do is I can say profile size dot index of, and basically again, this is another method or function that I can do to this string. And so what I want to do is, on this profile size string, I want to get the integer placeholder or location where X first appears. So what this is going to return, if I hover over this and look at the IntelliSense, is it's going to actually return the integer index of inside this string where that X appears. Now what I'm expecting is, if 0 is right ahead of the W, then we go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm looking for index number 4 to basically be the location of this X. Let's go ahead and see if this is true. So I'm going to say index of value, and I'm going to have to say toString, so that way it can go to that text field on the label. and let's see if that's true. So I'm expecting 4 to be the index of x in this profile size string. So let's go ahead and run this code. And there we go. We can see that the index of the x value is 4. Okay, so now let's say that I want to get that nominal depth. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this code. We're going to go ahead and take this out here. And I'm going to put this below because code executes from top to bottom. So it's basically going from top, and then the compiler is going to run down each line of code. And so we first need to get that index or that index of the x value first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put that here. I'm going to say index of value. And what that should do is that we're going to tell it to give us the substring starting at 0. So right here ahead of the W. And we're telling it to read 4 characters across. So W, 2, 3, and 4. So it should give us all 4 of those characters. So let's go ahead and see if that's what we actually get. So we're going to take this nominal depth. We'll go ahead and make that the results that we're going to show in the label. I'll say do stuff, and now we have W234. All right, so if you want to pause here and kind of play with this, take a look at this for a second and make sure that it's all making sense. Rewind it if you need to. Try some different values in the strings and see if you can get this to work. Okay, so what if I want the weight, basically everything after the x? All right, well, let's do a string, and let's just say profile weight will be the variable name. And this time we're going to use that index, but here we're going to say profile size, and we're going to say dot substring, and we're going to basically put the index of value, and then we're going to do a comma, and we could specify the length, or if we actually just leave this out, there's if you do the arrow keys, and you see on my screen here where it basically has a method overload. So the substring method has the ability to accept different types of inputs here. So I can either just put the start index and it'll start at that location and then read the rest of the string, or I can say a start location and a specific number of characters that I want it to read. I really want it to just start at that X and then read the rest of the string and return that to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave that there. We'll change nominal depth to profile weight to show on the user interface. So we'll just change the results text to profile weight. We'll run the code and let's see what we get. Now here we get the X55. So I don't necessarily want the X in here. I just want the 55 value, right? So what I can do is I can say, instead of reading the substring at a start of where the X value is found, I can actually increase that by 1. So by adding a +1, I'm telling it to read a substring that is 1 placeholder over from the X, right? So look here. If you follow my cursor, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where the index of the X is found. But if I want to get rid of the X, I can just say add one more value, and here it'll then read only the 55. So let's go ahead and run this, do stuff, and there we have 55. Because basically we read one index value further along or higher than where the X was found. So these are some of the different things that you can do with strings. Now, I want you to go ahead and do basically, again, a search on Google to go look at all of these different methods and look at code examples. I'm just showing you some of the top level stuff that you can kind of do here. Another common one is when the user enters stuff on the user interface, they may type in lowercase or uppercase, and you want to do some test conditions based on something that the user entered, or maybe Tekla can only accept capital cases and the user might be typing lowercase for a profile. So if you want to check that or force a string to be uppercase or lowercase, we can actually do that. So watch this. I'm going to say uppercase profile. We can say, let's get text underscore inputs dot text field. Okay, so we're pulling from the text box on the form UI. So this is text inputs right here. Again, see how I've clicked on this? You look at the lower right hand corner and the name of this control is text underscore inputs. So the text box is called text inputs, and we're getting the text value or whatever the user has filled into the actual text box itself. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this .ToUpper. Okay, so ToUpper basically will take whatever the user has typed in there and it'll make it all uppercase and it's going to return that string. So because this text is a string, just like these are strings here, this text property of the text box is a string, you can basically apply text or string based methods and functions to that, and ToUpper is a good example of that. So let's go ahead and change this to uppercase profile. And I'm going to intentionally type in lowercase w12 by 14 here. Now when I say do stuff, it should show me capital W and capital X, which it does. So you can also do lowercase, etc. as well, just in case you need to. So these basic, stringing things together, how to get substrings or find an index of a specific thing in a string, these are really common things that you'll need to do when you're actually parsing through strings to figure out certain stuff. And so what I invite you to do again is go, like if you come in here and let's just say nominal depth, we'll just take that as an example, and I'm going to say dot. And when I do that, all of these things that are purple boxes, these are all methods or functions or special commands that you can basically do to strings in order to, kind of parse through them, split them, or string them all together. Now, what I invite you to do is basically do a search on Google, just like I showed in the previous video, where you come in here and you'll basically do a search for that C# and that method, and it'll give you example code. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so here in Google, I'm going to do C# and then I'm going to do string.trim. And you can see here that when I enter search here, it shows me that this is a method or basically a function. And so the trim method on strings is going to get rid of the white space at the beginning or the end of a string and return a new string without those. So here, whenever you look this up, it's going to give you a description. It tells you exactly what this thing does, and then it gives you a code example. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this trim here in action. So a good example of this is, let's say on the profile size, I had some extra spaces at the beginning or the end. How does this happen? Well, let's say you're running a report out of Tekla structures and it has a bunch of leading or trailing space bars because of the value fields. And unfortunately, that's how the template editor works. And so if you want to get rid of those, like let's say you're actually reading that text file report and you're trying to parse it and do some stuff with that, what you can actually do is get rid of those leading and trailing spaces. And you use the trim method to basically do that. So watch this. I'm going to take the profile size and I'm just going to say profile size variable, and I'm going to say trim. And this is a method, so all methods have to have parentheses at the end, and then you can pass parameters into that method. Now, I don't really need to pass any parameters here because I just want it to trim both the leading and the trailing white spaces. So I'm just going to go ahead and say play. And now when I press that, it's going to show me that the result is W234 by 55. Now watch this. If I actually got rid of that trim and just output the profile size, you'll see that in the label, it's actually going to add those spaces at the beginning and at the end because that's what I have here in the original string. So again, using Google, you can actually do a lookup on a lot of these different extra methods and functions that are needed. Now, the other thing too is sometimes you might not know about something in C#. You're like, oh, I'm trying to do this thing with code and I don't know how to get this done with strings. If you do C# and you do a search for like kind of even in pretty good English terms what you're trying to do, like split a string or add or convert integer to string and things like that, basically you're going to most likely get some pretty good sample code back. But here as an overview, this shows you some of the most common things that you're going to be doing with strings, which is really like finding a specific location of a particular character, trimming things, changing the case to all uppercase if need be. And these are some pretty common methods or operations that you'll do to strings. Right when I was about to publish and produce the video, I forgot there's one other big operation that I want to show you, and that is replace. So watch this. I'm going to say new profile, and I'm going to say the profile size dot replace, and there's even a remove, but here I'm going to do replace. And basically what you specify here is either the source, sort of like what's in the string now, and then you comma what you want to replace it with. And so what I'm going to do is, let's say on the 234, I'm going to replace the 234 with basically a W12, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to search for any sequence of all three of those characters in order. And if I had 234 twice, it would replace both sets of 234. So you have to be careful with this and make sure that's exactly what you want. But I'm going to replace the 234 with the 12. And this replace is, it's not going to override or change the original profile size. It's just going to replace that and then return a new string here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the original profile size. Now watch this. I'm going to put a plus. And so now I'm using a combination of some of the things that we've learned in this exercise. And I'm going to then put the new profile. And I'm going to show both of those results there on the dialog box. Now, we also want to get rid of all those extra spaces. So watch this. We can actually combine multiple things here. So I'm going to do a trim. And then I'm going to, once I trim that original profile size, I'm going to then do the replace afterwards. So you can kind of string multiple methods or commands here together. So I'm going to go ahead and run this code, and let's see what we get. So now I get space, W234 by 55. And then what I can do is then you'll see that the resultant code is W12 by 55. So here, this replace, I use this a lot. Like I'm doing a find and replace of certain things in a string, and this is a pretty common method and operation that you'll do as well.